Hello, here we are again on a Sunday morning, and I'm afraid I'm now in my my big coat, which is like a horse blanket, but it's nice because I'm back to a radiator, as some of you will know if you've been sitting in this part, and we've got the lovely statue behind me and the candle you may or may not see, also to remind us of the living presence of God around and about, and it is quite a sharp and frosty morning, shall we say, in midwinter. A beautiful, of course, lovely looking over the landscape of the churchyard and beyond, and the fields. The landscape here is a constant. I think it's one of the best you could possibly have, and it sort of helps mood, I think, well, it certainly helps my mood. And creation is responsive. You would think that nothing is happening in this time of the year. And last week, I was looking out for snowdrops in my garden. I've only got a tiny clump of snowdrops. So last year, Jill, my neighbour, gave me a clump of their snowdrops, and I put them in. I thought, well, this will be marvellous. And then last week, I noticed only one clump had come up. And I thought, well, I think they're famously difficult to sort of replant or something like that. But blow me, a few days ago, there are little snowdrops coming through the surface of the soil. So extraordinary, isn't it? We'd absolutely no sign of it 5 days ago, and yet wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Here we've got the wonderful molehills in the little Bathoe churchyard, which are also interesting. And, of course, this last week we've had a lot of water with a flurry of snow. I was at the ford probably last Sunday, I think, finding a family that I wasn't expecting to find at the ford. But the ford was almost up to the footpath bridge. Extraordinary. We managed to sort of get through. But little partridges in the fields. So I'm sure you're thinking, as you, I suppose you'll be seeing this probably later on in the day, I'd imagine, having not got it to Graham early enough. But still, the beautiful surroundings of Little Bathoe, or where you are, and just enjoying that beginning of the day. I looked out of the window early this morning and saw pink clouds with a blue sky. Wonderful, frosted glory. And I have been round for another longer walk on my day off, and was sort of being chased by Essex and Suffolk water vans, which rather amused me that they've got their strapline is living water, which was a strapline that we used in the cathedral where I was working before I came here, living water, and reminding me of John's Gospel, Jesus' encounter with a Samaritan woman when he talks about, if you'd only ask, I will give you living water that wells up to eternal life. These amazing images in John's Gospel, trying again and again to express something of the extraordinary transformational power of God in our own fragile times. We'll be coming on to that a little later. So as we reflect on the change of light, possibly in the morning, we're going to now listen to a beautiful piece that Lara has chosen by Armstrong Gibbs. Many of you will know that Armstrong Gibbs was quite a famous composer who's buried in Danbury churchyard, but he had some beautiful music, and Laura's found some wonderful thing. This wonderful piece called Quiet Winter from his Lakeland pictures, based on his visit to Tarn Hawes. It's a very gentle piece, Lara tells me, with a sound of ticking rhythm throughout, like the constancy of time, and the imagery of water flows and changes around it. But you may discover your own imagery when you listen to it at this time. as we focus our attention on more things of from the Bible and Scripture and our thoughts of God, and talking about outside, things perhaps very imperceptibly changing, like snowdrops, but also the light. I'm sure some of you will be aware of just slightly imperceptible changes of light. It's getting lighter in the morning, which is lovely. Looking around here, we are still in Epiphany tide. Brian has got us, did an Epiphany. We're still in this time of Epiphany being traditionally signs where we would look for God's glory. And if we looked at the altar frontal, you'll see it's still white, like Christmas in a way. This is the beautiful glinting time. We still haven't quite got, we are not losing Christmas just yet. We've still got the kings, the magi are at the crib, and this is the season of glory, and the star is still shining, or hanging anyway, suspended from the roof rafters inside the church. So these are weeks of Epiphany where we try to discover God's glory close by and laid bare. But of course it's been a really rough time. I'm hearing now people this last week or so now talking to me about how fed up they are, frightened they are, and knowing a lot of people who have got COVID-19, some friends, close family as well, and we're aware of it, and it's quite close by. So we think of those people having to cope and those who worry over them. I think of Jill and others that are coping with it, and Joan, and then finding how frightening and tough and depressing it is that this sort of after Christmas, the dead weeks, as it were, of January, trying to play upon our own insecurities as well. And if you are on your own again, you have to scout a bit more to find someone perhaps to give you a little bit of gentle tug, to say, come on, pull yourself together, or, let's find things that actually give us hope and heart. And I used to use Clive James a lot. Well, now he's moved on. I've discovered Grace Dent. I chuck out all the recipes from the supplements from the Guardian, but the one thing I always read is Grace Dent at the end. And Grace Dent, who's rather a sort of a fierce-looking restaurant critic, has actually shown her humanity in her pieces that she writes. Her mother is up north and she's looking after her at the moment, it sounds like, and she's finding absolutely every little bit of things to sort of reasons to be joyous and thankful for. And this is a little piece I just want to read you about how she's found this. As a younger woman, I'd have probably named sex, luxury, travel and disco dancing as the pinnacles of earthly joy, which was foolish because I now realise it is owning a complete set of nestable lock and lock food containers. Yes, I'm sure Studio 54 was pleasant and that Bianca Jagger had a terrific time on that horse in 1977, but tell me this, did she ever feel the satisfying clunk-click of leftover soup being securely locked into a neat, sterilised box? Did she ever stack freshly dishwashed plastic boxes on a shelf, each with its corresponding lid awaiting further practical instruction? I fear not, but it is here, within these minor victories, that the purest ecstasy lies. And then she writes, on Wednesday the sun showed its face over Derwentwater at 8:21 a.m, giving us a few more minutes sunlight than the week before. More than 5, fewer than 10, but summer, I noted, is definitely coming. So hooray for the people like Grace Dent to keep us, and also hooray for people like Maggie and Joan, John and Graham that keep me in their own lockable little boxes of food offerings that they're very sweetly making sure that I'm eating well. And as you can see, I am eating well and filling out full. So a prayer of praise for this day's beginning. And as I said, thinking about the pink clouds and the blue sky that met me this morning and in the hard frost. What a glory, what a sight. And tiny birds are fast and furious picking over the frozen blades of grass to find something to restore and enliven them and keep out the sword of cold from their tiny frames. God of glory, this is your world, and so much of it unsullied by human hands is glorious. We praise you for the beauty all around us, for the comfort we get as we see new every morning your wonderful world. Let not our fear silence the joy of life itself, encouraged by the tiny living things that grasp the day courageously and feed and forage with such purposefulness. We rejoice in these things that delight us, renew us, comfort us, and keep us earthed and watchful of beauty set before us. As we explore the riches within this limited world, hurraying the stories of rescue and restoration like those miners in China, and a new purposefulness amongst those of goodwill in the Americas, we reach to the grace that comes down from above, that meets our world generously, extravagantly, and fashions us anew, if we would only allow it. Come, make your home within as we relax into your world of grace, as we warm to your presence and the signs of transformation. We bring those closest to our thoughts for blessing at the beginning of their day, and any in need of healing. The knowledge and love you have of them, to meet them and fill them with light. We give thanks for your presence and for your salvation, lifted to all life through the purposeful gift of the obedience of Jesus, as he offers living water to a parched existence. Give us courage and curiosity to experience that living water and share the precious gift of presence and life to those around us this day, and not to be afraid. We ask this inspired by the life of Jesus and accompanied by your Spirit, setting before us life and love, truth and forgiveness. Amen. Lara chose one of my favourite folk hymns, Now the Green Blade Riseth, especially for all of us who have wintry hearts this day. So we are having a very difficult time at the moment. A lot of you, though, have had the vaccine, and it's always lovely to hear that. I always have great cheer hearing people that have had the vaccine. Marvellous. But there are many people that haven't and are feeling more exposed than ever, of course, at this time. And I wonder if any of you saw, I suppose a lot of you might have seen, the filming of the inauguration of Joe Biden last Wednesday as president. It was a moment to acknowledge, and for many of us, it was an introduction to the extraordinary work of Amanda Gorman, that 22-year-old young poet laureate in America, about speaking about the struggle that has been hers since she was born. She writes, if we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. And I just thought it's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. And the day before, I think Joe Biden was inaugurated, he was part of a service remembering those who had died. I think, I'm just still trying to work out what that was, but I just heard on the radio that I picked up just a snippet of his own reflection, which is about healing. And of course, he's had quite a painful past himself. He said, you need to go back to the past, and that is often very hard. I reflected on that. It was quite a moving and quite a challenging thing for him to say, I think. So I guess at most church services we expect some kind of time of confession. But actually, confession is really just acknowledging, or perhaps not just, but acknowledging the reality of ourselves and going back to the past in order to open up some light and space for healing. So at Little Baddow, I really loved the third Sunday services and trying to encourage Graham to think about doing some of those again as well. And also that lovely confession that Lara put to music and that we often sing. And so maybe just to remind us about something very much personal, very part of Little Baddow services, but also something to be open to, our own confession of our own broken lives and needing new life within, and to lay ourselves bare to God's love and his forgiveness. I don't know whether you use the Psalms at all, but they're a source of sometimes great solace to me, and also they also express absolutely everything that a human being can express, including hate, vengeance and deep depression, but also a great sense of focusing beyond themselves and to God. Obviously, it's a cry to God. It's a poetry that can actually move so much. And one of the most favourite psalms of many, many people that have really nothing to do with church at all is the Shepherd's Psalm, Psalm 23. And as I look out over beyond this churchyard, over to the navigation canal, it reminds me a little bit of this psalm. It's about the sort of the willows and the river and the waters, often still water, but the last couple of weeks not particularly still. So I'm going to use this psalm in the way that I tend to read the psalms, which is, you'll notice, for some people rather irritatingly, it's slow, it's reflective, and I try to break up the first half of the verse with a little pause, so I'm really recognising it, and then to complete it with the second half of the verse. So, the Lord's my shepherd, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. For thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This is the Gospel for today, and it comes from chapter 2 of John's Gospel, beginning at the first verse. On the third day, there was a marriage at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also was invited to the marriage with his disciples. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "O woman, what have you to do with me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now 6 stone jars were standing there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the steward of the feast." So they took it. And when the steward of the feast tasted the water now become wine, and did not know where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, "Every man serves the good wine first, and when men have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." This, the first of his signs, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. It's an extraordinary story you find in John's Gospel. A wonderful story. And it reminds me of that man that I keep thinking about, the man that thinks that the Gospels or the Christian faith is all fairy tale. Because you could almost be hard put to sort of say, well, I know what he's getting at. It's almost like a fable here. What's going on? It feels like a different kind of what's happening. And you can think, well, I can think of John in his community, reflecting deeply on the difference that has come upon him and their community ever since they have opened their lives up to a living God that has been expressed in Jesus, a person that they would have not have known in their own lives, because he's writing probably about 80 years afterwards, but with all that reflection, he's had years to reflect deeply. What is this newness, this kind of extraordinary thing that sort of that you're so aware of God's presence? How can we describe it? And describing it, well, what better, especially for a group from Little Baddow, between water into wine. I mean, if I'd have done a bit more research, I could have rung up John Wheeldon and asked him exactly how much would that be of wine? 6 stone jars, 20 or 30 gallons. How much wine would that be in litres, John, today? The best you could possibly offer to the good people of Little Baddow from your suppliers in France. Well, it's massive, isn't it? But this water becoming wine, it's just a wonderful image of completely. Well, we get it, don't we? If we like wine, we do get it. It's something that's going to be fantastic, but also it's kind of grounded in the everyday world, in this extraordinary country wedding at Cana in Galilee. But everything is not quite so simple. John is an extremely sophisticated evangelist and writer, and this is only the second chapter of his gospel. If you remember the first chapter with that extraordinary prologue about in the beginning, the Word in the beginning, reflecting the book of Genesis, and now we have something else happening, and it's just before that he tells that story of a wedding. As I said, he is actually seen to encourage the people around that are curious about him to come and see what he's up to stay with him, and they call others. So you have Philip calling Nathaniel and saying, come and see this person that we found from Nazareth. And Nathaniel, who's a pretty clued up bloke, says, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And Philip says, "Come and see." So he's repeating Jesus' reflection, "Come and see." And then when when Nathaniel sees Jesus, and because he knows exactly where he's been, he said, "My goodness, you know absolutely everything, and you haven't seen nothing yet. You wait." And this is the link, and this is the clue for the story of the marriage at Cana. He says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened, and angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." He's linking back, John is linking back to the scriptures of Jacob when he was fleeing from his brother because he was a little so-and-so. He managed to steal his birthright from him. And he, exhausted, he lay down and went to sleep, trying to retreat from his brother, and he had a dream, and the dream is the angels ascending and descending upon the earth. And John is taking that well-known story and saying, this is the situation with Jesus. He is the access to things heavenly. It's through him that angels descend and ascend. And then he uses those phrases, which you'll notice if you read the Greek, in that chapter, in that little bit about the wedding, because you get this up and down, kato and ano, up and down, all the time. And it's to do with a marriage So what is happening is things, riches from above, gifts of God, can be found in the earthiness of our lives. And what better place than a marriage, a wedding, where it would be appalling if the wine ran out. And you notice that this comes up when Jesus said, "Fill the jars with water." So fill them up. He said, "Fill them up to the brim." And then pour them out. All these images, again, repeating themselves, up and down, up and down. It's through Jesus that is happening. And a really rather fierce thing that is said to his mother at the very beginning, and it is actually fierce, when she says they have no wine, and she looks to him, and he said, what have I to do with you? What's it to do? My hour has not yet come. Of course, this is a classic big sign for John. The hour of glorification is actually when he is on the cross. My hour has not yet come, and yet God's gifts through Jesus comes at any time. This is John saying. The other Gospels, you get the sense of the coming of Jesus, the coming of God's salvation, talking about the end of time. So you get all these titles of Jesus coming up throughout the other Gospels. But actually at the very beginning of the Gospel, it's Nathanael that does it, who actually says, he says, "You are the Son of God, you are the King of Israel." He uses all these titles just before we have the marriage of at Cana. He uses all these titles for Jesus right at the beginning of the Gospel. And the point about that is actually John wants to start where all the others left off. They have it at the end, the second coming, and actually the coming of God for John is actually at the beginning. And so actually throughout the whole of his Gospel, you will see images of what happens. It's sort of at the end of time. Don't wait to an end of sort of a period of time. But God's presence, God's glory, as experienced by John and his community, is now. It's kind of what's known technically as realised eschatology. So the time is now. So we can experience God's glory, his judgment, his transformation, the way he uses the world, or can be used or found in the world. His glory can be found even in the state of, and especially in a period of pandemic. We can still find God close to us. His glory will never be erased, because he is the living one, and he brings his gifts right at the very beginning. So Jesus is found to be the sort of human face of God right at the very beginning of the Gospel, and it continues the whole time. So there's this great sense of judgment always, and love that actually helps us come through that gaze of love and judgment that Jesus is always giving those around him. And so you find it, and why you find it on the third day is also the clue. There was a marriage at Cana in Galilee. Where else would you find a third day? Of course, the third day is when the day of resurrection for John and his community. And so these signs is always next day, but now, God's gifts. So, all right, he might say, my hour has not yet come, because, of course, he's still got his ministry. But actually, at the very beginning, we see abundance, extravagance, and a transformation going on for people. And it makes all the difference in the world. And that's why the steward of the feast is surprised and confused. Like, every man serves the good wine first. And then when everybody's legless, it doesn't really matter what else you get. But now you've kept the good wine until now. And that is what... So the quality of life that can be found in our own time, whatever the situation, is there, is open for us. And it's again, we hear Jesus saying, come and see. Allow yourselves space for transformation in your own lives. And I was thinking about, it is all to do with transformation, this actual gospel reading today. But transformation, for me, is something, well, for me, yes, certainly, it has to be, because I'm just too fearful, frightened, sinful, whatever, I kind of block things like a beaver's dam. I block things out. You need to be able to be open to be able to receive that. For me, that's a process. Transformation is concertinaed in this wonderful encounter at a wedding, at a simple country wedding, with masses of wine, the finest quality, the quality that John and Joan would absolutely say as connoisseurs, this is absolutely the best. That's the quality. Right now, this is what God gives. But there is a process of transformation. And I think a lot of people, especially a lot of the Eastern Church, will talk about sanctification. It's the Holy Spirit working within, just sort of spring cleaning, I suppose. And ourselves, being able to allow ourselves. And that takes time. It takes not only time, it takes our own sort of personalities and problems and situations and maybe past things that have gone wrong or whatever. All that needs, but it's this extraordinary thing that is offered to us now. So judgment is now, but so is gift and love and grace that God gives now. It's realised eschatology. We don't have to wait for it all. We don't have to sleep, as often the Victorians and also other people would think, in death. It's to do with now, and it begins now. And you look at that story again, you find that it's all on different levels and different timings. It's all in different levels, and it's a hopeful sign. And when we move on, I mean, these early chapters, the book of signs almost, are the first part of John's Gospel. You'll find it up till the 4th chapter. It will talk about that was the first sign of Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, manifested his glory. And so this sign actually gives glory. It shines out glory, and we could be reflected in that glory. And I would hope offer that glory to the rest of the world in wintry times. It's something you can hear I'm going on too much about it, but there are a few pointers for you to perhaps take that little bit of that chapter to yourself and find out. Be creative in your own thinking. So what is this saying? Remember, John is a sophisticated writer. He's trying to say there is something about this extraordinary person that shows us God in all his fullness, and it comes close to us and transforms us. I mentioned to Lara that we were going to have this theme of transformation, and she thought very hard about some music to go with that theme. And she said, so she came to Grieg, and he wrote something called Butterflies, Opus 43, number 1. She said a butterfly seems the perfect image of transformation, and what a lovely and positive one in frankly gloomy days. So this is Lara playing Grieg's Opus 43, number 1, Butterfly. Some prayers. I'm going to base these prayers on that Psalm 23, and with a reflection of that navigation canal that you can see if you look across from the churchyard, and the willows in some parts of the canal. I've got a lovely picture, an oil painting that Mary Claber painted with that particular view. The Lord is my shepherd, therefore can I lack nothing. Good shepherd, you walked in the wilderness of our world, trod the same path, drew out the glory contained in every creature's frame, and joined it to the sunlight and the moonlight of our nights and our days. Though we see our world full of need and longing, fight and thrall, and we struggle to make a difference, defeated by our unbelief, you continue to present us with the endless resourcefulness of God, whose generosity knows no bounds. Encourage us to follow where grace beckons, and as blessing blossoms, make us rich in praise. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. He makes me lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters. The willows brush lightly over the river, their touch reinforcing some unseen connection with the universe, wishing a blessing on those in need of rest. Such images of peace, gifted to all your broken ones, preferred not by merit, but through compassion, a natural display of your divinity, bringing strong confidence to those in need. Good shepherd, feed your lambs. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. He shall refresh my soul and guide me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Away from quiet sanctuaries, where can the world find its way and its peace? How can such consecration transform all to live a life of blessing, not curse? Good shepherd, you take a prophet's stand against the powerful and the ruthless, and continue to make the mark of your Father on human hearts. Give us a hunger for justice in our world. Bring us to the centre of the Father's will and good purposes, so that every situation of challenge and testing can be fueled in the light of hope. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. In the stillness, we place those we know who are hurting. We bring our love and our prayer. Meet them with your healing power, and in the soil of all our suffering, show us how to grow the seeds of new life to make a world of a difference. Surely goodness and loving mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the love of the Lord forever. Amen.